In this section, we're going to tackle the question, what is justice? Justice is an idea that's very difficult to define, partially because it's a very personal idea. What I consider justice may not be what you consider justice. So we all have our own conceptions of what justice is. But the definition that's really at the heart of our justice system in the United States is Aristotle's definition of justice. Aristotle says, justice consists of treating equals equally and unequals unequally according to relevant differences. Okay, let's consider that. Justice consists of treating equals equally and unequals unequally according to relevant differences. At first glance, we're really appalled by this definition. That's because we read his definition from our own cultural understanding of the word difference. We immediately assume that relevant differences refers to race, gender, religion, nationality, or sexual orientation. But remember, these weren't even constructs when Aristotle was writing. Instead, ask yourself this question. Should a person who abducts a child from a playground, sexually assaults a child, and then murders the child be treated as the same as a shoplifter? Should he or she receive the same sentence as a shoplifter? Of course not. See, to Aristotle, relevant differences concerned the type of offense and the harm inflicted. Relevant differences had nothing to do with characteristics of individuals. When we read his definition, removing our own cultural connotations, you can really see the beauty in the definition. The danger in Aristotle's definition is that someone would use it to justify treating people differently based on individual characteristics. So the definition is not without flaws, but I'd like for you to give it consideration without immediately dismissing it. Let's talk about two different types of justice. The first one, distributive justice, this is really how a political entity or a government distributes resources to its members. Now, relevant differences apply. There's the idea of a rightful or merited and deserved distribution. Just distribution depends on an individual's contribution and value to the community, and not necessarily what they need. Two people may actually have identical needs, but one may deserve it more. Retributive justice is concerned with how a society determines guilt or innocence. That's procedural justice. Also, how it determines the proper punishment for the guilty. That would be substantive justice. Really, at the heart of retributive justice is that individuals get what they rightly deserve according to their behavior. And to be just, society must punish with fairness and impartiality. Equals must be punished equally, and unequals unequally. So where does justice come from? Well, there's really two perspectives. First is transcendental natural law. So whatever is considered right and proper in any given society is morally right even if outsiders might consider some practices of that society morally repugnant. For instance, cannibalism, wife beating, widow burning, mutilation. Transcendentalists assert that the ought of law runs downward from some transcendental realm, so meaning it's divine, right? It's from God. It's from some higher power that's above and beyond what it is to be human. The evolutionary perspective also sees kind of this idea of natural law, but it explains the origins of law and justice with reference to the principles of evolutionary biology. Law and justice flow from the evolved nature of human beings. Humans are biologically predisposed to make certain choices because those choices, they've promoted the survival and reproductive success of all of our distant ancestors. Because they were functional and necessary to our survival, these choices became norms and they were eventually codified into law. So, law and justice are not identical. So, what is the relationship between law and justice? Well, it's interesting. Law can be in accordance with justice. That is, when it respects, cultivates, protects the dignity of even the most marginalized person in our society. When law doesn't do this, it violates justice. At the heart of the relationship between the law and justice is something that we call equity, right? So equity refers to the remedies for the wrongs that have occurred. The goal of law really should be to bring itself in line with what is just. Lastly, let's talk about this idea of the rule of law. The rule of law is simply this: laws change, but the law must remain. It's an idea that seems to have originated with Plato. There's really three elements: that a nation must recognize the supremacy of certain fundamental values and principles. And these values and principles, they must be committed in writing. There has to be a system of procedures that holds governments to these values and principles. And lastly, one that's really not shown here, but we should probably include, is that no one is supposed to be above the law.